So, Andrea, the stage is yours. Yes.
It's very nice to see Brit and Frederick here, because the first time I came here, Margot invited me to come. It was a very difficult weekend, I remember. And I think it was in the 1990, something like that. Yeah. So I think that I am the patriarch of psychosynthesis. Yeah. And so it's nice to be here for the Margot Russell Day. We're a good friend, and there is a continuity. Now there is a long continuity, a tradition, a lineage, I would say, a lineage. And speaking about borders, it's very urgent at the moment, very urgent, because the illusion of stability of borders, and speaking of geographical and political borders, has vanished. No, doesn't exist anymore. Who could imagine 3 years ago that Russia would have gone to take Ukraine, and before that Crimea, and so on. And I see that, for instance, there is maybe when I came in March, there were army, navy in the harbor, no? So this sense that the borders that we have lived for decades, they don't exist anymore in the same way, no? And I think it's a sort of a hologram, meaning that the theme of borders applies to nations, geography, interpersonal borders, intrapersonal borders. And what we reflect about borders, it applies to all those different situations. So it's not that I'm giving a talk about the political situation, I'm giving a talk about psychosynthesis, even if I start from far away. Can we have the...
You have the remote control.
Now I must guess which one is the good one. It's easy, but I rely on techniques, not very much. Which one of this should...
It's supposed to be the right one.
The right one? Oh, okay, okay, we made it. Well, those are the walls of Lucca, my hometown. It took 100 years to build those walls. At that time, projects, they were long-term, which is interesting because there was not the limitation in time. You have to do it faster, no? Like this city is growing. Why do I take this image? Not to show you the beauty of the walls, but to speak about the fact that we bring in our history the sense of fear of the enemy. Those walls, they are from Renaissance time, but before that there were medieval walls, smaller, and before that Roman walls, 80 years before Christ, Roman walls. So there was the sense that we needed to defend, no? That's the first thing about borders. And it makes sense because, for instance, if I come a little too close, you feel a little uncomfortable, you move back, you know? We speak about that, the inner dimension, the space dimension. So even if we don't know, we bring in the collective memory, in the unconscious memory, this sense of risk that we need to defend our borders. And for instance, I was thinking of the fact that due to the Russian invasion, Finland asked to enter in the NATO, and maybe even Sweden is entering which is to defend the border, I enlarge the borders. No, I give up something of my independence to be safe. No? Everything that I say can apply to individuals as well and to groups. It's about identification and mechanism defense. You know this, the Chinese, it was supposed to defend from the Mongolian invasion. It never worked because it was not complete. So it was just a question to move the little south. It's interesting that there is this legend that you can see the Chinese wall from the moon. It seems that it's not true, but it's a myth. And that's interesting, that we have a myth that there is something so strong, so big, so eternal that can be seen from another planet. And the theme of planets and other planets, it's interesting again about borders. I love maps. I passed 3 days drawing maps on more and more chaotic on the border, but I love the idea of maps. Those are ancient maps. And what did you find in the map when they didn't know the territory fully? What happened? They wrote, here are lions. Hic sunt leones. Hic sunt leones. So we have a lion there. And but even more interesting, in some maps there is hic sunt dragones. So it's interesting because leones could be real, but dragones is really a symbol of the unconscious. No? So where we don't know, where there is the border, what I know, and beyond that border, there is the lower unconscious, the collective lower unconscious, manifesting as beasts. No, it's very evident. I like this map because it's absolutely, yes, we know to this point, then it's not really clear what you find. But we pretend. No? So we draw anyway a map, you know, which is exactly what we do as psychotherapists. We pretend to know more than we understand really of the person.
It is.
Okay. This is Venice. And there is something romantic about this vision of Venice, like a big fish, like a big fish. You know that Venice was born again on little islands to defend from the people coming from the land, no? But in the map, there is always a lot of imagination. Don't try to visit Venice with this map. But it's interesting because where we don't know, we use imagination. No? And it doesn't mean that it's not real, because imagination creates reality. Try always to think that it can apply to individual as well. What I was commenting with Frederick, I did this lecture online 1 year ago, and hackers entered in the lecture, drawing stuff on my slides, making intervention. I thought it's perfect. Borders, hackers coming in. And so I was saying, let's hope it doesn't come a porno video in between, which happened actually to one of my colleagues. So there was a lesson in that. You want to defend, you want to go out, and people come in. The funny thing, there were 3 people with masks. It was a little, the funny thing that at a certain point, they become interested in the lecture. And they make questions. So they were included. They were included, which is one of the team. No, we'll speak about exclusion, inclusion, which is another hot theme here in Sweden, in Italy. I would say in every place exposed to Porto. No, that's something I want to talk about. This guy is Korzybski. Korzybski was the philosopher, engineer, doctorate in physics, and one of his books, General Semantic, was always on the desk of Assagioli, and published by the Non-Aristotelian Library. That was the name of the publisher. And Korzybski used this expression that we spend continuously now, which is the map is not the territory. No? It's not the territory. But we need maps. We know 2-3 maps of psychosynthesis, and we know it's not the territory. But why do we use maps? Why do we have to use maps? No. There are different functions of a map. First, they describe the territory, no? Which could be an MMPI questionnaire, 550 questions, which describe the psyche of a person. No, that's a map. That's a map. Because of this description, I go back to that. Because of this description, we make some prediction. We say, if you in the MMPI result to be severe borderline, it means that I could expect some kind of behavior, dysfunctional behavior. For instance, extreme fear of intimacy, impulses, uncontrollable. So that's a map that describes, that's a map that predict, explain, and predict. Explain. Because you are like this, because you have this problem of attachment in the first 2 years of your life, then I can predict this. But then there is another function of the map which is very interesting. The map itself transforms the reality. Make an example. You don't know what's happening to you. Then you receive a map in terms of a diagnosis. And this makes sense to you and give a new vision of your situation, psychological situation. And you could be relieved by the fact that you have this diagnosis. So the map itself can transform just for the fact that it exists. Then it transforms because it gives us some direction as well. No. Because of this map, I should work on this thematic of my life. I translate this. This comes from a book of a psychiatrist that someone who works, let's say, on the fire line with very severe situation in the hospital. And he speaks of his patients in this way. And he says, Filippo, not that Philip, Filippo, you need borders more than oxygen because identity is a confine, it's a border. And so me, anarchist by nature, I'm obliged to build walls. Before walls inside you, like rooms in an apartment. Then between you and what is out of you. Isn't that a beautiful description? No. Walls, rooms inside you, and then big walls outside. And they need to be thick walls, very high. Then the freedom to destroy the walls, we look for it later. It's so clear in the description. When I was young psychologist doing some time in the mental hospital of Pistoia, it was the time of what it was called anti-psychiatria, anti-psychiatry movement, which was defining in totally different way the mental illness and so on. And so there was a big wall. This happens always. People discussing, why didn't you do the washing machine? I love it. People fighting, proposing sex. Whatever. So there was a big wall dividing what they call it the chronic schizophrenic by the acute psychosis. We know that acute psychosis has a better prognosis than a chronic slow psychosis. So together, doctors, nurses, and some of the patients, they destroyed the wall. It was a very strong symbolic act. Well, many of the chronic psychotics, it took months to go beyond the walls unexisting. So that's important to remember that in some of our work, we have to build big, thick walls. For instance, going a little technically, but it's necessary. We can meet, let's say, people with symptoms obsessive compulsive. So ritual, long ritual, necessity of control, whatever. But young psychologists can make a big mistake because this can cover a psychosis. So with a neurotic obsessive compulsive, you work on the unconscious. With a psychotic obsessive compulsive, you don't touch the unconscious, and you work in between walls and the way to live. So this is a beautiful book and with a very provocative title, which is The Art to Bind the Patient. No? Very interesting book. But I love this description of Philip. Prison. Well, it's very interesting. I'm starting next week again a program in a prison in Arezzo. I did that already for 2 years and something. I had a great time with the prisoners, great time. And I'm working online with a group of educators in Bolivia, in a prison in La Paz, a very advanced prison. They have a lot of workshop, parental education, child education. The mother could keep the children. And I work with them with writing, teaching writing exercise, psychosynthesis. Just psychosynthesis. So we work on teams like that. It's very interesting because prison can be a great occasion to work on yourself. No? I remember that when I was supposed to start this work 20 years ago in the prison, I spoke with Goenka. Goenka, this big man, was done with me meditation. I've seen the video about Vipassana in a jail, Vipassana in a jail in New Delhi, 10 days retreat in a jail. And Goenka said, I asked for advice. What should I expect? And they say, it's a normal group like the others, but the guards, they should do the program as well, which was not possible in the Italian prison. So it was a bit more difficult. And then I spoke with Ramdas. Ramdas had done work in the, come si dice, braccio della morte, in San Quentin death corridor, the last mile, the famous last mile. I asked him and he said, consider the situation an ashram. So try to do that. So walls can be a good container to go inside in a different situation. I have no idea if I'm satisfied your criteria about where I should be, but
I'm changing my criteria all the time.
That's good. Flexibility is a gift. Should I speak about this? Well, by the way, it could be very interesting to go deeper in the model instead. And I'm joking, but not to take for granted, because Assaggiolo was very subtle about that. Very subtle. For instance, Piero Ferrucci asked him, why did you choose an egg? And he said, no reason. It's not true. It's not true. Because it was the egg, the origin of the universe, because it has two polarities, but there is no end, there is a continuity of the line. So many, many good reasons. So we always remember the fact that there are dots, no? Dots and not line, so that there is a continuous flow. And when we teach sometimes in a shallow way. There is the lower unconscious, and then there is the middle unconscious, and then when you get really okay, you go to the higher unconscious. It's not true at all. It's all together since the start. It's a cocktail with different proportion. How much martini? And the olive is the eye and the consciousness. This beautiful drawing is mine. And I want to speak about different levels of borders. Now we enter, because the ovoid is this. But because we come culturally from the psychoanalytical tradition, that's the lineage. And before that, other things, but the lineage is, Assaggiolo was a psychoanalyst, let's not forget. He was writing on the psychoanalytical review, translating Freud, corresponding with Freud, friendship with Jung, all the things that we all know. But I am underlining this because we speak of individual, but then speaking of individual, of course, we take in families. No? The family is the origin of the individual psyche. But then we are less attentive to the local culture around. What does it mean to be a Stockholmer instead than Kirani, which is the name of Kiruna? Kiruna, yeah. Well, so how is the local culture affecting the psyche, determining, for instance, the sense of distance between the people? No, and enlarging that. The more we enlarge, the less we become conscious, because we swim in that water and we don't see the water. We don't see the water. We have to change aquarium to test the different water. So, for instance, for me it has been so interesting all this year to confront the Italian unconscious with the Swedish unconscious. No? Some of you know my conclusion. You are really emotional and passionate, and we are really schizoid and mental. No, you laugh, but it's absolutely true. No, it's just a question of being emotionally introverted, while Italians are emotionally extroverted, but it's on a social level. Then you don't go really easily deep. I said to the group of therapists I was following, in this room, I must throw a bomb to raise something. In Sweden, everybody cries. It's much better. Much better. So it's funny because when I come from a workshop, my wife, who's a psychologist, she asked me, how many people cry? That's the define if it was a good weekend or not. That's the test. So, national culture. I was surprised in the academy. I think you probably don't know how many people of different culture have joined the training. You have any statistics? Interesting. Interesting that you don't have any statistic about that. Linda is trying to. Yes, there was a Mexican lady, I remember. There was another lady from Nicaragua, Ivona, and then there was someone from Korea, and then there was a Japanese woman, and then there was, I don't remember, Africans. Yeah. And then we had, no, look, now we have, what do you, we have Persians, more than one, I think. So what do you know of their culture? You have spent 4 years in the room with them. Did you never ask it yourself, what is her culture? What does she bring when she realized to me? Which is the difference? You didn't notice. Why? Because we pretend that people adjust to our culture. That's the law. You come here, you adjust to our culture. You try to do your best to become Swedish or Italian. No? So, what do you have to comment about this? You seem student when somebody let's read that chapter. What do you think about that? Linda, you have a mother that comes from Lithuania. Estonia. How does it affect your being here, your Estonian heritage?
I often, almost always bring that up when I present myself, and that's important, and it has become more and more important, especially when we have groups with participants that also are from other places.
Yeah.
It can give them some, they can feel seen a little bit when I mention also she came over the ocean as a boat refugee during the Second World War. Just that feels so up to date. It's like happening now. So I think since that started to happen, I mention it more.
Mm. Yeah. And for instance, we could immediately think, we know from epigenetics now that parents' trauma, they arrive directly in our DNA. Mm. It's the not removed unconscious. We bring in the conscious and we cannot touch. No? So, a part of the trauma coming as a refugee, which is the difference that you see from the culture of your mother and your culture in behaviors, in relationships.
What was the first question? Say again.
Well, how is your mother different from you as a culture?
It's a large question. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
But there is. I think I realize the older I get that it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And I think that I can also use here in the training.
Yeah.
It's something wider and broader.
Mhm.
Like the world is with me.
Yeah.
In a bigger sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any comments? You had, I don't remember the first group if there was someone from another country.
Probably not.
It's more
One
like-
from Norway, but that doesn't count.
That must be recorded.
It's more likely that it can happen. We always comment on we're happy when we are happy. It brings so much more richness to the group.
In theory, but is it addressed or not? This is the point.
Yeah.
This is the point. Yes, please.
Well, isn't it the fact that we have, we have an immense number of identities, don't we? We have certain beliefs, we have values. We perceive that we belong to a certain political group, or local group, a community, a family. And now you're taking putting the focus on the national identity.
Yeah.
So what the question arising in me is about the relevance of precisely the national identity being one amongst a large number of identities, which I have.
Well, there is studies from Cardinal about what is called the national character, in which is explored Abraham Cardinal has explored the belief system, ritual, attitude to food, different criteria. If we don't address, they stay in the unconscious of the room. And there is a necessity to conform to the group, which in Sweden, it's already a big thing, the necessity to conform. No? So we have in the room unaddressed points. And in a group that works on discovering the subpersonality that move our behavior, we like something, no? And not a banal thing. Look at the story of Linda with a refugee coming by boat, Second World War. Think if Linda could just bypass that. No. So it's a theme that I would like to be addressed with these people on an equal basis. That's the point. Because let me see if I find, yes. With Frederick, we had a terrible work to do together. We went to Argentina, to Bali, to England, working with young people from all over the world. Do you remember, Frederick, how many times the cultural thing come in?
Yeah, and I think that the difference is that in those groups, there was no majority culture.
Yeah.
Everybody was in a minority. It's much different when there is a majority culture and some people have a different background. I think it's easier that it gets unaddressed when the majority shares something. And I think that goes not only with culture, that goes with a lot of things. I mean, that can go with for sexual orientation or anything when there is a minority having a different experience. If there's only one or two, it's harder to
take notice.
To take notice of that experience and for them to bring it up.
Yeah. We had some fantastic episodes. imagine that we had maybe some girls from Sri Lanka or India, so very shy, with a totally different attitude about sex. And the farmer who was our guest, who ran the place where we work, said, "The condom are there." I remember you never had Hazel here, I think, no? Hazel was never teaching here. She is South African black. I remember that, possibly me, but I'm not sure, there was one of the African boys, and I liked to touch his hair. No, I liked the sensation. And this South African lady was furious. He said it was a racist, which I disagree, because, but interesting that she had this reaction. No? So we had continuously to take notice of those things, working intensively on the personal, interpersonal, and planetary level. That was the necessity. So I think that it's something that we could try to address more. That's the point. And we are obliged to address more, because this is a place, let's say a safe place, quiet, but the next generation of immigrants, they'll come to the windows. Because those are the people, not the people who arrive, but the second generation is the Les banlieues à Paris, no? The immigrants, the sons of Maghrebian thing. That's the point in which the identity, the crash of identity will explode. And we cannot avoid that, because poverty brings millions of people. It's very funny because the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, she got a lot of votes saying, "I will put the Army Navy closing the harbors." We never had so many immigrants like now coming with the boats, because it's simply impossible. If you are starving, you move. No. So this is not, I'm not speaking, I try to have a long-term vision. We have to address that on a collective psychological movement. Thinking that there are people with this, knowing what we have absolutely in common as human beings, and thinking how can we make feel that they're finding a place. Identity, it means, we'll speak about the word confine in Italian. Identity means that I meet here on the confine, you are Swedish, I'm Italian, we know some of each other, but we keep identity and we can talk. Flexible borders. And I will arrive to what I consider an image that can be our guideline. So the project goes on, still goes on. It's called WISE, World Youth Service Enterprise. It was a beautiful project. Going a little lighter, before I went to there is this anthropologist, Edward T. Hall, who studied the distance in different cultures. I'm fascinated by somebody that can find the money to study something like that. And now I need to see in Africa. I can go for 6 months in Africa. And so there is even the diagram. We always need the diagram, no? And intimacy, we mean that we can touch. Personal space, it's at least 40 centimeters. It's very interesting because it's changed from culture to culture, obviously. I'm sure that in the north of Sweden is different than in the south of Sweden, the distance, the acceptable distance from a person, which is the respect. We sort of have a territorial water, no? Like the 6 miles that we have from the coast, which are your water, no? I tell you one story. The Brahmin law says that an outcast should stay 39 meters far from a Brahmin. Isn't that funny? Terrible, but funny. Well, I tell you this. I saw an old lady with a big jar of water coming in a place in a tea store where I was taking the tea. So I decided to help. I took the jar and I put on the ground. She put the water out because I am an outcast. So I contaminated the water. And she has to do 3 kilometers again to take the water. So it was very helpful. But that's interesting. I remember once in Germany, I just was touching the car and the guy from the shop 10 meters came, don't touch my car. I was just, no. So we have a distance which define the kind of relationship. We are very familiar with that in our place where we work, no? When we decide distance, the setting, whatever is the setting. So we have cultural setting. We must be aware of the cultural, otherwise the poor lady goes to take the water another time. When there was the civil war in Yugoslavia, it was very important for the collective unconscious because it was the first time that there was a terrible war in Europe. And who of you has done an holiday in ex-Yugoslavia in your life? 1, 2, 3, 4. So it was just there, no? And so when you discover that there is a war in a place in which you were lying down on the beach, the war becomes real, no? And I remember that I had a lot of dreams of patients during Nazi time, war, people intruding. So we had to work on dreams of this collective unconscious fear around. And I spoke with an officer. We went to Croatia to do some help in a refugee camp. And a Croatian officer said to me, you can't understand what happened if you don't know that it started on the 2 shores of a river, which was the river that divided Roman Empire East and Roman Empire West. So think how it goes deep in the collective unconscious, and we stay there. Let's explain, for instance, some sequence of crimes in families. South of Italy. People kill a member, you have killed my grandfather, so I'll kill your brother. So and it goes on for generation and generation. If it doesn't become conscious to everybody what is happening. So that's something that you read afterwards in the slide, but I tell you what it is. I don't know the etymology of border in English, the original root of the word, but I know confine. Confine, it comes from finis, end, termination. But there is a tricky point. Why do you have to put even the con? Cum finis. You don't need that. You have finis. Here, Italy finish. Here it starts Sweden. Why do you need to put cum? And the explanation is beautiful. The explanation is because where you are, on the other side, there is another person. So you are sharing that point. So there is a connection. So when there are good borders, let's say, between parents and children, there is the shared part and there is the division. So we can ask, for instance, suggest an exercise. We can ask, for instance, for our clients to draw the borders in the family. In family system, now we pretend that the parents are up and the children are there. There are not crossed alliance. So that's a map. That's a map. But we could go deeper about working. But the idea is we share this land and we have identity. I think it's beautiful, the word confine. We should find something similar in English. Or I don't know in Sweden, which is the word, or where does it come from?
Gräns. I don't know where it comes from.
I think that during this weekend, in which we were sort of summarizing all the path and psychosynthesis, we worked very often about the original meaning of the words. Because the words, they have history, they bring history. Well, that's my ideal model. Why? What do you notice, Frederick? You student of the first year. I like to be professor now and then. I like it.
I noticed that the cells are joined in a whole, and they are distinct. They each have their border.
Yeah. It's so good, this student.
Do I get an A?
You should make a career. You could become a principal, enter in the board. Take again the place of the guy who wants to choreograph me. So, in the cell as a nucleus, there is a nucleus of the cell. First of all, so exactly like we have in the egg, a nucleus. But more than that, it's interesting. I remember when I studied at the high school, I was not very interested in the scientific work, but I liked the membrana, which is the word for membrana. The membrane. That's good. Yeah, the right word. The membrane of the cell. I remember that I was fascinated to discover what they call the sodium-potassium pump, which means that there is a system inside the cell that let nutrition come in and expel toxic substances. And it's flexible, so it's flexible. I think it's the ideal model of a psychosynthesis, of a personal psychosynthesis. And as Frederick noticed immediately, monocellular organisms, they exist, but they don't do a great career. So the complexity is the point. We build up on complexity. No? I'm close to end. It's very interesting. Today we did a meditation at a certain point. I like to do. It's a meditation in a sense that Assessor proposed. He called it the right perspective. And you begin to where you are, then you see the roof of your house, then you see the city, then you see the country, then you see the planet, then you don't see the planet, you are somewhere lost in the universe. And at that point you are in trouble. But then, and then you come back with this vision. So to be in the cell and to be in the planet. And now I think what is happening now, again, let's go to Occupy Mars. No? There is this project of Elon Musk to go to Mars, to violate borders, is in my opinion, my personal opinion. So, and we should always be aware that we are a little planet in a peripheral galaxy of the galactic, the Milky Way, as they call it, Milky for the white color, of one of the many universes. So let's stay little humble. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share about the theme of borders, trying to connect the work of the psychotherapist with social psychology and planetarian psychology. And being aware that the more we enlarge, the more we find all the level of unconscious again. All the level. It's like an hologram. The individual psyche is an hologram of the universe. And by the way, we are made of the same elements, iron, minerals, same elements. Okay. I don't know where you are. How do you feel? Elisa is my friend, so I can bother her. Tell what you feel.
Something about holding the larger perspective that's so important. Be very local and then hold the global, but act and love, as Tom Jones says, act and love very, very locally, but be this global being, like to be rooted in that, fully big and very local at the same time. So important. So important. That's all what it's about, sort of. To have those two together.
I have some hope in the new generation about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The impact that Greta had on the young people, it's important. I see that I can hear talks in my family, which I didn't expect, sort of larger awareness that I never had. Well, the problem is that we have a geriatric leadership. So we still lives in another mental system. When, for instance, Modi, the premier of India, 1,400,000,000 inhabitants, India. So one person every 5 is an Indian. No, let's be aware of what does it mean. And when he says, well, you spoiled the climate yourself, and now it's our turn to earn money. So it's again not to see global scene.
System.
I don't know if I depressed you.
I would like to address something you said about the different culture. You know, when you meet someone in a therapist situation, that person is not Swedish. You're supposed to help this person, and then still, I think it's a very, very good point that you bring out, that you need to address their different culture. And when you get the question, will you help me even though I don't speak Swedish?
Yeah.
Or you can have this situation where you think you know how they feel, but you don't, because they have this different background. And it's a very, very good point that you bring it up, because you know that's something to bring along, you know, to hold when you meet someone. And as Linda said, she tells about her mother. I did not know about your mother, and I think I know you pretty well. But you know, so it's new to me, and it gives me another perspective about it, which is nice, you know, to my heart. So I feel in this room that you have given us, or at least me, a new perspective. And I thank you for that.
I follow it for some time, an ethno-psychiatrist. And together, I don't know if you heard about Toby Nathan. Toby Nathan is a French psychoanalyst who has worked a lot with people from Africa, knowing well Africa. So he used the African setting. So you have a psychological problem. You address this entity, and you can bring as many people as you want to the meeting. So you bring your brother, a friend, the healer of the village, which is in Paris as well. And the therapist can bring other orientalment and things. And there is a sort of ritual. So a ceremony about how does it work. I had a client who said that she had received black magic from her mother-in-law. And since then, she had a lot of strange phenomena, problems. And so she asked for psychological help, starting saying that she had tachycardia. Then she opened up, and first thing that she asked is, do you believe that this can happen? And they said, well, billions of inhabitants of the planet believe that. So, could be, we don't know, could be. And we did a session about this in this setting, because being black magic, which is very present in North Africa, in every part of Africa, but it's present in Lucca as well. I would like to know how many witches there are in Stockholm. No, I'm serious. When I was a teacher in the high school, I asked, how many of you have seen a traditional healer to take away fear with oil to see if there is the bad eye thing? Half of the students, it was high school, half of the students raised the hand. So the magic thought is present and very effective. So we did this work like African setting, and then it came out that it was a work as family system. So interesting, so interesting. Another time I was consulted by a man who had married a Balinese lady and moved her to Perugia in the center of Umbria. A Balinese lives together with people. There is an expression of, if you go walking by yourself, the expression is, do you dare to walk alone? Do you dare? But it's not because of criminals, it's because of spirits. So this poor woman who had this idea to marry a Western man maybe because she was poor, arrived in a place in which none of the ritual, not the right orientation of the house, nothing worked as she was used to. So when the husband, it was in a confusional state. Yeah, and it was diagnosed as confusional psychosis. And so the husband, I don't know which way he knew that I knew Indonesian, but so when I spoke with her, I spoke my minimal Indonesian. That was half of the solution. She could speak her language. And I didn't understand everything she said, but the important thing is that I was answering. Then I said to her husband, you should build the family temple. Don't bother with the neighbors. She must have the family temple, and she must do the morning ceremony and give offer to the gods of the family temple. Done. Solution. She could have ended in a mental hospital. So we must know who is beyond that border. And of course, we cannot know a lot of things. So we ask them, and they love to tell you, yes, I am in a Santeria. Did you have any Brazilian in the training? No, because in Brazilian you ask about Santerias and Candomblé and the ritual, you know that there is this word. So if we ask, it's enough. It's enough. And it's important to explain the rules of the game. How does it work here in Sweden? You are not supposed to do this. Otherwise, so I think that this could be a new field of research for the academy, including some anthropologists, learning from anthropologists, and connecting with the communities. How many ethnic communities you have? Yeah, which are the most important ones?
I think the biggest, the older immigrant groups are from Iran, Chile, and there are more recent ones from Syria, Iraq, Somalia. Yeah.
I guess I always like to investigate with taxi driver. I ask from the airport, the poor guy, I want to know everything. When did you come here? How does it work? Do you send money at home? And you never go home. But the last one was from Somalia. And I remember, Frederick, you telling me that nearby there was a little shop before. Along the road on the left. And you told me that's an Iraqi lady or an Iranian lady.
Don't remember that.
And but she's going again to her country because she's an important
She
politician.
was a minister, yeah. Okay, yeah, det var där. Then she moved back to, I think, Kurdistan.
And she was deeply involved in the politics of her country. And so you have someone who has such an interest in life and we don't bring to teach at the academy. Tell us how it is to be a woman. So that's an idea. It's an idea that I expressed at other times. So we could have a meeting like this with representative of many different cultures, like in the white situation. So that it's not, oh, we are an Iranian, let's see how it is. We have Furas, she's Iranian. Mm. Okay. I have finished my batteries. Okay.
So this is where we stop.
Yeah.
And yay! Okay, so to everyone at home. To everyone at home, ciao. Thanks for tonight.